You rarely remember the first time you saw a certain kind of image: a convoy at night, a leader at a podium with flags, aid being distributed in an orderly line, a grieving civilian framed in close-up. What makes these images persuasive is their recurrence. Hi, I'm Sav. I research visual propaganda. In this series, each episode isolates one tactic, identifies 3 recurring cues, and ends with one practical counter tool. The aim is to slow down automatic interpretation by making structure visible. Today's tactic is repetition and templates. A visual template is a repeatable scenario with stable roles, stable composition, and stable symbolism. Once established, it can be filled with new people, new locations, new dates. The surface changes, but the structure remains. Framing theory helps explain this. In Goffman's terms, frames organize experience in advance. In Entman's model, framing involves selection and salience. Repetition stabilizes both. What is selected repeatedly becomes expected. What is omitted repeatedly becomes invisible. From a multimodal perspective, repetition creates visual cohesion. Kress and Van Leeuwen describe how meaning is structured through recurring representational and compositional choices. When those choices recur across events, they begin to function as genre conventions instead of contingent decisions. The key point is patterned recurrence across groups of images, not the impact of a single frame. The images shown function as examples for analyzing structure. They illustrate recurring visual patterns that appear across many contexts and forms of media. Their inclusion here does not classify them as propaganda, staging, or manipulation. They are treated as visual constructions that help demonstrate how repetition can make certain arrangements feel familiar and natural over time. The first cue is simple. You start seeing the same kind of scene again and again. Even when the date and location change, the setup stays familiar. Someone delivering a speech from a tightly controlled interior, military equipment moving through city streets at night, civilians receiving aid in neat supervised lines, or commemorative rituals that tie what's happening now to all the historical memory. Each scenario assigns stable roles. Authority speaks, equipment moves, civilians endure. History offers legitimacy. Even as individuals change, the roles remain fixed. Over time, the scenario itself begins to register as reality instead of representation. Events are encountered through a familiar script. Repetition lowers interpretive effort. Viewers do not need to pause to understand what they are seeing. The structure is already known. Instead of focusing on one image in isolation, move across time. Look at coverage from the same outlet over several weeks or months and compare the scenes. Consider whether you are encountering genuinely new visual situations or the same structural arrangement populated by different individuals. The second cue is repeated composition. Let's take a look at how these templates show up as layout habits. A leader is photographed with flags behind, shot at eye level or from slightly below. Crowds get pushed into a narrow strip at the bottom of the frame, while a banner or emblem dominates above them. Aid distribution appears as an orderly line, often photographed from a slightly elevated viewpoint. Opponents, when shown, often appear farther away, blurred, partially obscured, or reduced to fragments instead of being presented as full individuals. These are compositional habits. Over time, they become visual default. You might notice that the composition itself follows a familiar pattern. The leader stands in the center of the frame, often with flags or an emblem behind them. The camera sits at eye level or slightly below. The audience occupies a narrow strip at the bottom. In visual grammar terms, salience and information value become stabilized. The same elements occupy the same positions. The center carries authority, the background signals legitimacy, and the lower frame gathers the public. When composition repeats, hierarchy repeats. Authority consistently occupies visual dominance. Civilians appear as supporting figures, witnesses instead of decision makers. Dissent, if present, tends to sit at the margins, distant, blurred, or fragmented. Because the arrangement recurs across many images, it begins to feel normal. The hierarchy does not appear constructed. It is natural. Before focusing on what the image shows, pause and ask a simple question. Does the layout already feel familiar? That recognition often signals a template instead of a one-off depiction. The third cue is repetition in words and symbols. Pay attention to the language around the image. The same terms often appear again and again in captions, banners, or backdrops. Words like victory, security, liberation, or defense. You start seeing them attached to different events, different places, different people. Visual symbols tend to repeat too. Flags, historical emblems, religious icons, they frame what is happening now and connect it to something larger. Roland Barthes wrote about this process using the term anchorage. A caption guides the way we interpret an image. It narrows the range of possible meanings. When the same keywords appear across many different posts, they begin to tie those events together under one narrative. The image shows a situation. The text tells us how to read it. Over time, the language stops sounding like an argument. It starts to sound like a simple description of reality. A small practical check. When you look at several posts from the same source, try listing the words and symbols that repeat. Then ask a second question: what words or symbols never appear? Repetition works because it slowly turns a particular arrangement into something that feels normal. One way to interrupt that effect is to start comparing images. Instead of looking at one image, look at a set. When you place several images from the same source side by side, the structure often becomes visible. Step 1 is to compare sets rather than singles. Gather multiple images from the same outlet across time and notice whether the same kinds of scenes and layouts keep appearing. Step 2 is to name the pattern. Instead of thinking, this is what happened, you might say, this is a aid distribution template, or this is a leader at the podium template. Giving the structure a name makes it easier to notice. Step 3 is to look for what does not appear. Which roles are missing? Do you ever see disagreement, disorder, or uncertainty? Or do the same orderly scenes repeat again and again? Templates rely on recurrence. When the same structure appears often enough, repetition alone can stabilize meaning over time. Repetition is less visible than dramatic manipulation. It works slowly, the same scene structure, the same composition, the same words, until the arrangement feels like the only possible way events can look. When you begin to see templates, you shift from reacting to single images to analyzing sequences. In the next episode, we'll explore the humor and irony shield, how meme formats and just joking frames allow political messages to circulate while softening accountability. If you notice repetition in your media environment, describe the template you see without naming people and identify the recurring structure.